In the mid-18th century, when the world still held vast blank spaces on its maps, one man's name began to shine among those who dared to fill them: Captain James Cook. Born in 1728 in the small Yorkshire village of Martin, England, Cook was not born into privilege or naval tradition. His father was a Scottish farm laborer, and young James grew up surrounded by open fields rather than the sea. Yet even as a boy, he had a natural curiosity about the world beyond the horizon. After basic schooling, Cook apprenticed to a shopkeeper in a small coastal village. But the call of the sea was irresistible. In 1746, he joined the merchant navy, learning the hard trade of navigation, tides, and winds aboard coal ships that ran between Newcastle and London. These were rough years, but they gave him an invaluable understanding of the sea's temperament. His exceptional mathematical mind and skill with charts soon caught the attention of his superiors. When the 7 Years' War erupted, Cook volunteered for the Royal Navy. During the war, he proved himself a master navigator and surveyor, charting the treacherous coasts of Newfoundland and the Gulf of St. Lawrence with such precision that his maps were still being used decades later. By 1768, his skill and discipline had reached the Admiralty, who were planning an extraordinary mission, one that would blend science, exploration, and empire. The Royal Society had asked the Navy to send an expedition to the Pacific Ocean to observe the transit of Venus, a rare astronomical event that could help measure the distance from the Earth to the Sun. Cook, now a lieutenant, was chosen to command the expedition. His ship was a sturdy, converted coal vessel renamed HMS Endeavour. The official mission was scientific, but the Admiralty's secret orders went further. After completing the astronomical work, Cook was to search for the fabled southern continent, Terra Australis Incognita. In August 1768, Endeavour set sail from Plymouth, England. Aboard were 94 men, including scientists, artists, and sailors. Among them was the young botanist Joseph Banks, whose passion for discovery matched Cook's own. The ship carried astronomical instruments, seeds, and trade goods, a floating laboratory and embassy of empire. The voyage across the Atlantic was uneventful, but by the time they reached Rio de Janeiro, Cook's patience was tested by suspicious Portuguese authorities who thought he was a spy. He kept his composure, determined to fulfill the mission. After rounding Cape Horn in brutal storms, the Endeavour finally entered the vast Pacific Ocean. For months, Cook navigated through the endless blue, guided only by stars and the charts of previous explorers. By April 1769, he reached Tahiti, a paradise of palm trees and warm lagoons. There, the crew set up an observatory to record the transit of Venus. The Tahitians were friendly, and Cook established relations with their chiefs. On June 3, 1769, as the sky darkened slightly, Cook and his men observed Venus cross the sun's disk, a moment that represented not only science, but also humankind's growing reach across the heavens. But the mission was far from over. Once the scientific goal was complete, Cook opened his secret orders. He was to proceed south to search for the unknown southern continent. For weeks, Endeavour pushed into colder, empty waters, but no land appeared. Finally, Cook turned west toward New Zealand, where the Dutch navigator Abel Tasman had landed more than a century earlier. Arriving off the coast of New Zealand in October 1769, Cook's expedition encountered the Maori, proud and skilled warriors who fiercely defended their land. Though there were moments of violent misunderstanding, Cook managed to establish communication and mutual respect. Over 6 months, he meticulously charted both islands, proving that New Zealand was not part of any southern continent, but an independent landmass. By March 1770, Endeavour sailed west again into uncharted waters. On April 19th, the lookout Nicholas Young sighted land, what is now known as Point Hicks, on the southeastern coast of Australia. It was the first recorded European sighting of Australia's east coast. Cook named the region New South Wales, believing its landscapes resembled parts of Britain. As Endeavour moved north along the coast, Cook and his crew marveled at the strange beauty of this new land. Forests of eucalyptus, brilliant parrots, and the mysterious kangaroo that bounded across open plains. The Aboriginal people they encountered lived in harmony with nature, using stone tools, bark canoes, and fire to manage the land. At Botany Bay, the scientists were overwhelmed by the diversity of plants, Banks and his assistant, Daniel Solander, collected hundreds of specimens never before seen by Europeans: flowering shrubs, exotic trees, and strange fruits. Cook named the place Botany Bay in their honor. The journey, however, was not without peril. As the ship continued northward, it struck the Great Barrier Reef near present-day Cooktown. The Endeavour ran aground, its hull torn open. For tense hours, the crew worked frantically to lighten the ship, throwing cannons and ballast overboard while the tide lifted them free. Cook's seamanship saved them, but the vessel was badly damaged. They anchored in a nearby river mouth for repairs, which Cook named the Endeavour River. During their stay, the crew met local Aboriginal groups. Although communication was difficult, Cook recorded observations of their customs and tools, remarking that they seemed to set no value upon anything we gave them. He admired their independence and resourcefulness. After weeks of repairs, Endeavour limped on, navigating dangerous reefs and unknown waters until they reached the Torres Strait. There, Cook claimed the entire eastern coast of Australia for Britain, naming it New South Wales. On August 22, 1770, he raised the Union Jack on Possession Island, unaware of how profoundly this act would reshape the future of a continent. As Endeavour crossed into the Indian Ocean and sailed toward Batavia, now Jakarta, for further repairs, Cook's mission was nearing its end. Yet disease and exhaustion took a heavy toll. Many of the crew succumbed to malaria and dysentery in the tropical heat. Cook's discipline and compassion kept order aboard even in the darkest days. By the time Endeavour returned to England in July 1771, the world had changed. Cook's charts of the Pacific were so precise that they became the foundation of navigation for decades. He had not only expanded the map of the known world, but also proven that the mythical southern continent, as imagined by earlier geographers, did not exist. The voyage of the Endeavour was hailed as one of the greatest in the history of exploration. Cook, once the son of a humble farmer, had become a national hero, the man who had illuminated the edges of the world. But for him, it was only the beginning. New challenges in uncharted waters still awaited. When Captain Cook returned to England in 1771, he was received as a hero. His voyage aboard the Endeavour had captured the imagination of scientists, sailors, and the general public alike. He brought back maps that redrew the Pacific, botanical specimens that filled London's gardens, and detailed logs that turned myth into measurable geography. Yet Cook himself was not content. Restless by nature and devoted to discovery, he longed to go again where no man had gone before. Within 2 years, he was given command of another expedition, one that would push even further into the unknown. The British Admiralty, encouraged by Cook's success, wanted to finally confirm whether a great southern continent existed in the unexplored reaches of the Pacific. 2 ships were prepared for the mission: Resolution, under Cook's command, and Adventure, commanded by Tobias Furneaux. Both were specially reinforced for icy seas, equipped with the latest navigational instruments and provisions for long isolation. In July 1772, Cook set sail from Plymouth once again, this time with orders to search the high southern latitudes. Unlike his first voyage, which had been a blend of science and empire, this journey was one of pure exploration, a test of endurance and faith in human capability. Cook's meticulous nature made him a demanding leader, but his crew respected him for his fairness and competence. His goal was simple yet monumental: to find the limits of the world. The Resolution and Adventure crossed the equator and sailed deep into the South Atlantic, where the sea turned gray and wild. Icebergs began to appear, ghostly white towers rising from the waves. Cook pushed south into freezing winds and endless fog, at one point reaching farther south than any ship before him. The cold was brutal. Rigging froze, sails cracked, and men shivered at their posts. But still, Cook pressed on, convinced that the legendary Terra Australis might lie just beyond the next horizon. After weeks of battling the elements, Cook realized the truth. There was no vast habitable southern continent, only endless ice. He had crossed the Antarctic Circle 3 times, proving that the ancient theory of a great southern land balancing the continents of the North was a myth. In his journal, Cook wrote with a tone of grim satisfaction, "I have now made the circuit of the Southern Ocean and have proved the non-existence of any continent unless near the pole. It was a statement that would change the world's understanding of geography forever. Turning north, Cook charted the islands of the South Pacific with precision. Tonga, Easter Island, and the mysterious Easter and Marquesas groups. He mapped coastlines, observed languages, and recorded customs with anthropological detail. Everywhere he went, he met people living in harmony with their islands, each culture unique yet connected by the great ocean that bound them all. He admired their navigation skills, noting that Polynesians could cross vast distances guided only by stars, waves, and birds. During a stop in Tahiti, Cook recruited a skilled navigator named Omai, a native of Raiatea, who later accompanied him to England, becoming the first Polynesian ever to visit Europe. For many, Omai symbolized the bridge between the old world and the new, proof that the Pacific was not an empty void, but a living network of civilizations. The Resolution and Adventure eventually separated during a storm near New Zealand, each continuing their own routes of exploration. Cook's command of the Resolution took him further west toward the islands of Tonga and New Caledonia, which he charted for the first time. He meticulously noted the reefs, bays, and anchorages, making the Pacific safer for future navigators. Yet even in moments of triumph, tragedy shadowed the expedition. Scurvy, accidents, and the sea itself claimed lives. Cook was deeply affected, writing in his diary that exploration was a pursuit purchased at the price of men's blood. By 1775, after 3 years at sea, Cook had completed one of the most comprehensive voyages in history. He had circled the globe at high southern latitudes, explored thousands of miles of uncharted ocean, and produced maps of unprecedented accuracy. When he returned to England, the scientific world hailed him as the greatest navigator of his age. His charts were so reliable that the Royal Navy used them well into the 19th century. Despite his fame, Cook was not a man of luxury. He found little peace on land and soon accepted the Admiralty's offer of a third and final voyage. This time, his mission would be to seek the elusive Northwest Passage, a route linking the Atlantic and Pacific across the Arctic. It was another quest for the edges of the known world. In 1776, the Resolution was refitted, and a new ship, Discovery, joined her. The crew was a mixture of old veterans and fresh faces, all eager for glory. Cook, now a seasoned commander in his late 40s, carried the weight of experience and a growing awareness of his mortality. Before departure, he visited his family, his wife Elizabeth and their 6 children, knowing this might be his last farewell. The voyage took them again through the familiar Pacific routes, stopping at the Cape of Good Hope and then sailing across the vast ocean toward the South Pacific. Cook revisited New Zealand and Tahiti, where he was welcomed as a returning friend. But his real course lay northward, toward lands yet unvisited by Europeans. In January 1778, after weeks of sailing through open water, the lookout cried, "Land ho!" They had reached the Hawaiian Islands, which Cook named the Sandwich Islands after his patron, the Earl of Sandwich. The Hawaiians greeted the expedition with curiosity and generosity. They were skilled seafarers living in a society of chiefs, priests, and farmers, organized under complex traditions. Cook and his men were treated almost as divine visitors, a misunderstanding that would later prove fatal. But at that moment, the contact was peaceful, filled with exchanges of gifts and knowledge. The lush islands provided fresh supplies, food, and water for the long journey ahead. From Hawaii, Cook turned north toward the coast of North America, charting the rugged shoreline of what is now Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. His maps of these regions were so precise that they remained official references for decades. He sailed into the icy waters of Alaska, pressing farther north into the Bering Strait in search of the Northwest Passage. The sea turned to slush and ice, and the ships could go no further. Cook realized that nature had set a final boundary no man could yet pass. Forced to retreat, he returned south to Hawaii in 1779, intending to rest and repair his ships before another attempt. At first, the Hawaiians welcomed him warmly, but after a few weeks, relations began to strain. Misunderstandings arose over thefts, cultural differences, and the heavy presence of armed men. The islanders, once friendly, grew wary. Cook's authority, always firm but calm, began to waver under the pressure. The turning point came when a small boat from the Discovery was stolen. Cook, desperate to assert control, decided to take the local chief hostage until the boat was returned, a decision that clashed with Hawaiian customs and pride. On the morning of February 14, 1779, Cook and a small party went ashore at Kealakekua Bay to carry out the plan. Tension was in the air. Hundreds of islanders gathered on the beach, watching silently. A confrontation broke out. Stones were thrown. In the chaos, Cook fired his musket, wounding one man. Then as he turned to order a retreat, he was struck on the head and stabbed with an iron dagger. The great navigator fell into the surf, dying instantly. His men, shocked and outnumbered, fled back to their boats. Cook's body was taken by the Hawaiians, who treated it according to their own sacred rituals, believing his spirit belonged to the gods of the sea. The news of his death spread slowly across the world. When the Resolution and Discovery finally returned to England in 1780, the nation mourned the loss of its greatest explorer. Monuments were erected in his honor. Poets and philosophers praised his courage and intellect. Yet his death also marked the end of an era, the last great chapter of the age of exploration. Cook's voyages had united the scientific curiosity of the Enlightenment with the practical power of empire. He had mapped more of the Earth's surface than any man before him, from the frozen edges of Antarctica to the coral reefs of Australia and the volcanic islands of the Pacific. He had shown that knowledge could overcome myth, that discipline could master chaos, and that courage could carry humanity into the unknown. In the centuries that followed, the lands he charted would change forever. Colonies would rise on the shores he once described as untouched. The native peoples he met would face the weight of contact and conquest. Yet even amid those dark consequences, Cook's legacy endures, not as a conqueror, but as a seeker of truth, whose compass always pointed toward discovery. When news of Captain James Cook's death reached England, it carried the weight of both tragedy and triumph. The man who had mapped the world's edges, who had faced the icy winds of the Antarctic and the tropical storms of the Pacific, was gone. For the public, it was almost unthinkable that a man so methodical, so cautious and skilled, could fall not to the sea or storm, but to human hands on a distant island. Yet Cook's legacy was already sealed. He had changed forever how the world saw itself. In the years that followed, his journals were published, his charts circulated across Europe, and his discoveries became the foundation of modern geography. The Admiralty declared his maps the finest ever produced. He had not only filled in blank spaces, but connected distant cultures, giving humanity its first true picture of the Pacific, an ocean that, before him, had been a realm of myths and half-known lands. Cook's precision astonished even the scientists of his time. Using the latest tools, the sextant, the newly developed marine chronometer, and his own mathematical skill, he could fix a ship's position within a few miles, something almost unimaginable before. His methodical approach to mapping transformed navigation from art into science. Mariners who once sailed by guesswork now followed his grid lines of latitude and longitude as if guided by invisible rails. But Cook's greatest contribution was not merely the maps, it was the spirit of inquiry that his voyages embodied. Every line he drew across the ocean represented not conquest but curiosity. He was a man of the Enlightenment, a believer in observation, evidence, and the universal reach of knowledge. The scientists who sailed with him, Joseph Banks, Daniel Solander, and others, turned his expeditions into floating laboratories, collecting specimens, recording climates, and cataloging the natural world with the precision of a new science. Geography joined with biology, astronomy, and anthropology. In London, the Royal Society recognized Cook's voyages as a turning point in human understanding. The collections brought back by Banks filled the halls of Kew Gardens and the British Museum with plants and animals that Europeans had never imagined: kangaroos, eucalyptus, and the brilliant birds of paradise. Artists who sailed with Cook sketched coral reefs, canoes, and the faces of Pacific peoples, preserving them in detailed watercolors that gave Europe its first visual encounter with Oceania. Through his voyages, the Pacific stopped being a blank void on a map and became a living mosaic of cultures and islands. Yet even as his fame grew, so did the shadow of empire. Britain's interest in Cook's discoveries was not purely scientific. The detailed reports he sent home, describing fertile lands, safe harbors, and native populations, became blueprints for colonial expansion. His charting of Australia's eastern coast led directly to the British settlement of New South Wales in 1788, less than 2 decades after his voyage. It was a paradox of exploration. Cook's voyages, meant to unite humanity through knowledge, also opened the door to conquest. The same maps that guided scientists would soon guide fleets of settlers. The Aboriginal peoples he had met briefly, whom he described as living without wants, would face centuries of dispossession and struggle. In that sense, Cook's legacy is both luminous and complex, a story of discovery and consequence. For Cook himself, however, empire was never the goal. His journals reveal a man often reflective and deeply human. He wrote with respect about the people he encountered, admiring their craftsmanship, their navigation skills, and their connection to nature. He ordered his men to treat islanders with fairness, and he enforced discipline harshly when his own sailors broke that rule. He once wrote, "No people upon earth are more happy than these. They live in a tranquility which is not disturbed by the inequality of condition." Such words coming from a naval officer of the 18th century were revolutionary, an early acknowledgement of the dignity of other civilizations. Even so, Cook was not immune to the pressures of command. Years at sea hardened him. The third voyage, long, exhausting, and filled with tension, revealed the strain that isolation could place upon the human spirit. His temper, once calm, grew sharper. His obsession with order sometimes crossed into severity. When he died in Hawaii, it was not just a tragic end to an explorer's life. It was a symbol of how fragile understanding could be between worlds so different. Back in England, Cook's memory was immortalized in monuments and paintings. His likeness appeared on medals and coins, his name etched onto schools, towns, and capes across the globe. Cooktown in Australia, Mount Cook in New Zealand, Cook Strait, Cook Islands, and even craters on the moon. To many, he became the model of the ideal explorer, disciplined, rational, and fearless. To others, he became a symbol of the dual nature of exploration itself. Discovery paired with domination, enlightenment shadowed by empire. As the 19th century dawned, ships followed his routes, armed with his charts and his principles of hygiene and navigation. His insistence on cleanliness, fresh food, and lemon juice to prevent scurvy saved countless lives. Before Cook, scurvy had killed more sailors than battle or storm. After him, it nearly vanished from the Royal Navy. Every voyage that came after his bore the mark of his methods, a testament to the power of reason applied at sea. Centuries later, historians and scientists still trace their disciplines to the path Cook carved. The modern study of oceanography, meteorology, and ethnography all owe part of their origins to the records kept aboard Endeavour and Resolution. Even in the age of satellites and GPS, his hand-drawn maps remain astonishingly accurate, their lines echoing a human patience and precision that no machine can replicate. In museums around the world, relics of his voyages are displayed. The sextant he used to read the stars, fragments of the Endeavour's hull, sketches of Pacific villages, and the delicate botanical samples preserved between glass. Each artifact tells the same story, of one man's determination to replace the world's myths with measured truth. And yet Cook's legacy cannot be understood through triumph alone. In the lands he reached, his name evokes mixed memories. In Australia, some view him as the harbinger of colonization. Others honor him as the first bridge between two worlds. In New Zealand, the Maori remember both the conflict and the mutual respect that defined their encounters. In Hawaii, where he fell, some still honor him with offerings, while others recall the sorrow of that day. History, like the ocean he sailed, is vast and contradictory. Still, what endures beyond politics or empire is the human element, the courage to explore without knowing what lies ahead. Cook's voyages stand as a monument to curiosity itself. He sailed farther than any man of his time, not because he sought glory, but because he believed that knowledge was a form of freedom. He once wrote, "I take possessions of new lands not for kings or crowns, but for the advancement of navigation and science." Whether he truly separated those motives is impossible to say, but his conviction gave purpose to every mile of open water. The story of Captain James Cook is not only about discovery, it is about the transformation of the human imagination. Before him, the world was a patchwork of half-known continents. After him, it became one interconnected globe. The unknown shrank, but wonder did not vanish. It only changed shape. The age of exploration gave way to the age of understanding, and Cook stood at the threshold between them. Today, satellites orbit the Earth he once charted by starlight, and robotic ships cross oceans without sails or compass. Yet the essence of Cook's voyage remains alive, in every act of curiosity, every scientific question, and every journey into the unknown. His compass may rest silent in a museum case, but the direction it points to, discovery, knowledge, and courage, still guides the world. As the final pages of his journals remind us, written in his precise and steady hand, ambition leads me not to fame, but to the edge of the known world, where knowledge ends and wonder begins. The waves that carried his ship have long since faded into history, but the course he set continues, across maps, across time, and across the restless human spirit that will forever look toward the horizon.